The Toronto Raptors continue to make moves with training camp just days away here now at this point. The Raptors officially completed a long anticipated signing that finally went through over the last day or so, as well as a surprise signing for a top former high school recruit, and there's still a ton of free agents available on the market, and the Raptors do have one roster spot left, and while it's likely Bruno Fernando does end up getting that spot, just want to highlight some of the players that are still out there on the open market for the Toronto Raptors to go after, because it looks like Masai Ujiri is a very active in regards to his decisions, his signings in the late off season. So lots of stuff to break down in this video. Before we do, folks, again, if you're part of the over 50% that hasn't hit the subscribe button just yet, make sure you guys hit that sub button. As I said, training camp is just around the corner. Preseason's coming, and that means Toronto Raptors basketball is back, and it's just weeks away. So you don't miss a single thing regarding this team. Make sure you guys hit that sub button. But let's dive into the news. Let's dive into what's been going on, because Blake Murphy's been having a field day with these sort of last-minute, late-season signings that have been going down for this Toronto Raptors squad. And the first one we're going to discuss is one that we expected. A lot of Raptors fans projected to end up going down due to reports that came out earlier in the summer, but the Toronto Raptors have signed Quincey Guerrier and to an Exhibit 10 deal. So you got to get familiar. If you want to keep up to date with all of the latest sort of transactions and moves that have been going on for the Toronto Raptors, the moves Masai Ujiri's been making, an Exhibit 10 contract is essentially a deal that allows a player to come in for training camp, and then the team has their rights. It has their contract rights, so they'll come over and they'll get a bonus that they signed with that team's G League squad. So essentially what Masai Ujiri's been doing a ton is bringing in guys on these Exhibit 10 deals, including, as we just saw, Quincey Guerrier, and then essentially gonna see if they get a chance at run or just waive them right away so then go to their 905 status. So who is Quincey Guerrier? Because he's Canadian, he's from Quebec, and he's 6'7", pretty solid athlete. We've discussed him a little bit over the course of the summer. He was on the Toronto Raptors Summer League team and didn't have the craziest of stats by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, didn't really start in any of the games, only got 13 minutes per night, and in those games came out 5 rebounds, which is pretty solid, but 5 points per game, less than assist. Didn't really show out, but showed some solid defense, some solid energy, got some boards, played some D, and then, we're hopeful that in terms of our development system, our farm system can improve him on the offensive end, specifically shooting the basketball, because even in college, didn't show crazy flashes of being an elite three-point shooter. Did improve over every single season that he was in, playing college basketball. Ended up shooting close to 37 or over 37% from the three-point line, of his college career. But wasn't one of those crazy high-level scorers. It was more of one of those dogs that played defense, that locked people up, that hustled, that got some rebounds. Again, 6 rebounds per night, for that 6'7", 6'8" position height. That's pretty solid for a guy that can come out there, play on the wing, and do some stuff for you. So for the 905, he's not going to be a guy that's going to have a shot at getting called up or make the roster, at least in the very short term. But again, the Raptors development has had some hidden gems, has developed players in the right way. So he has the raw intangibles in terms of frame, size, athleticism to be a guy that could have a decent NBA career ahead of him, but it will require some development. But the Toronto Raptors, that wasn't the only move they made. Well, firstly, they made it official, so they waived Quincey Guerrier, so he's going to be officially with the 905, so he's not going to be a player that's going to be getting that camp roster spot. And they made another move, as the Raptors signed Kennedy Chandler, who is a name that if you watched a few high school mixtapes, Balls Life mixtapes, or whatever they're called now at this point, you might be familiar with, because Kennedy Chandler was one of those 5-star recruits coming out there from college. He was a guy that got drafted in the second round to the Memphis Grizzlies, and it was kind of a shock that he slid so far in the NBA draft just a couple seasons ago. And I believe he was selected 38th overall, if I'm not mistaken. So ended up falling in the draft to the Memphis Grizzlies. And then there was a lot of people hopeful. He had a very impressive summer league, and people were hopeful that he'd have that NBA-style career. But really couldn't find his footing with the Memphis Grizzlies. Things didn't really work out. And now he's in this Toronto Raptors system, because we can take a look at his stats in terms of what he's been able to provide over the course of his career. Again, only played 1 season in the NBA. He's 6 foot, averaged 2.2 points per game, 1.6 assists, shot 13% from the three-point line. Again, 36 games, so not an outrageously small sample size, but didn't get a ton of minutes in those types of actions. But essentially, we can take a look at to get a better idea, a better feel for what he's able to provide, taking a look at what he did out there on in the G League, for this most recent season, and is a guy that can definitely put up points, can definitely, at 6 foot, do his thing out there, average 6 assists per game on top of it. Last season, essentially, let me get the year right there. Yeah, so last season, averaged 14.4 points per game, averaged 5 assists per game, shot 34% from the three-point line, which is much more significant improvement over the 14% he made, in the NBA level, and then the only 21% he was shooting out there in his first stint in the G League. So again, a guy that's small, that's athletic, that can score in bunches, can really do his thing out there, slash and drive in the basket. And we take a look at how he's sort of viewed as a player, right? He can score off the dribble, he can do different things, he can play make, he can do this type of stuff, but he's very streaky as a jump shooter, and that really didn't translate well in the NBA. These are his college stats coming into the league, and can play pretty wildly. So it seems like over the course of his career, in terms of the numbers, the production, he has been calming himself down a little bit, has been adjusting his game, out there in the G League, but definitely a player that had that high potential, that high sort of, potential upside for a team. It just hasn't really played out for the G League, hasn't played out there for the Memphis Grizzlies. So we'll see with the Toronto Raptors, because again, this will be another 905 signing, as Blake Murphy indicated. The Raptors have waived Kennedy Chandler, so the Raptors 905 are getting that early roster work this week, and the Exhibit Zeros, he's been calling them, the players are signed to Exhibit 10s and then cut immediately, so they get the bonuses they sign with the 905. That's, they're all over the place. So there's back to one open roster spot for camp. So basically, there's no real shot that Kennedy Chandler or Quincey Guerrier this season, because again, they're in the prospect pool, they have the chance of making the roster in the future, but there's an open roster spot now, one spot left, and there are some really, really big name free agents still out there on the open market. So we can basically take a look at terms of the guys that are still available out there on this team. The big one is Markelle Fultz, because again, the league is loaded with talent here now at this point. We have guys like Lonnie Walker taking Exhibit 10 deals for the Boston Celtics, which is pretty crazy to really think about, given the fact that that man was a pretty solid elite scorer. Now Markelle Fultz, a guy that was a number 1 overall pick that played really well for the Orlando Magic, and still dealt with some injuries and stuff, but was a pretty productive player for the Orlando Magic last season, is still without a contract this deep into the offseason. And he's not old by any stretch of the imagination. He's not old over the hill. There's other guys that are trying to make their NBA comebacks that Masai Ujiri could definitely take a look at. That includes guys like Victor Oladipo, who's still available, JaVale McGee still available. Those are guys that are more veterans, which I don't expect the Toronto Raptors to come out there and make those moves for. But given the fact we still have our open roster spot, we still have that spot available. I've seen a lot of Raptors fans saying, hey, why don't we take that flyer on Markelle Fultz? D Rose just retired. Shout out to D Rose. Crazy start to his NBA career. Wish him the best of retirement, but some people are saying, DMing me about D Rose and stuff. I don't think the Toronto Raptors go in that direction. The only one I would is kind of Markelle Fultz, who is still relatively young, still a guy that can provide some production. The Raptors have some question marks at that backup point guard spot. So, I mean, that's an interesting route Masai Ujiri could take, but I believe Bruno Fernando is going to be the guy that ends up getting that final roster spot. I believe he was brought in on that unguaranteed deal as saying, hey, if we don't get Christian Koloko, you're going to get that roster spot. So I imagine that's what's happening, and that's why there's going to be a ton more of Exhibit 10 deals that are going to be filling up the G League roster, filling up the prospect pool, coming out there for the future. But probably in the short term, we don't expect a big signing, for this team. I think if it's going to be some more win-now signings, Masai Ujiri is going to do that come December, seeing how this roster looks, seeing how this team goes over the course of the start of the season. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. You guys have a single star. Subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already. Anyways, I'm signing out. Cheers.